So welcome, everybody. I want to invite you to just sit comfortably, and we will take a couple of settling breaths to really get here. This whole business of being fully present can often be a challenge. So we want to take a moment to thank ourselves for showing up. Take a few breaths. Noticing any tight or tense places in your body. And just noticing that they're there. Don't need to do anything about it. And appreciating carving out some time simply to be. So this week's Parsha is Vayera. And it is, as most of these weeks of Genesis, it is chock full of a lot of stuff. So I'm going to give you a very brief summary. The Parsha starts off with Abraham greeting three strangers and welcoming them to his tent. And this is right after he has been circumcised, and he is recovering from that circumcision. The next exciting thing that happens in the Parsha is that God shares with Abraham God's intention to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because the people are so evil. And you may recall that Abraham has this argument with God about doing that. And Abraham and Sarah have a visit with King Abimelech, which is another little interesting, tiny little episode. And Sarah ends up giving birth to Isaac, which she and Abraham had been informed was going to happen by those messengers earlier in the Parsha. And then after Isaac is born, Sarah decides that Hagar, her servant, and Ishmael, Hagar's child that she had with Abraham when Sarah suggested that they do this, since Sarah was barren, Sarah decides that the house isn't big enough for all of them. And she asks Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away, and he does. And then we have a brief episode of Hagar and Ishmael in the wilderness, where it looks as though they're not going to make it because they run out of water, but they do make it, as we know. And then very close to the end of the Parsha, we have the very famous story of the binding of Isaac. So this is really, there's a lot here, and there's a lot that I could be focusing on. And what happened for me as I was preparing was I read the Musar Torah commentary, and in this commentary, the Musar trait, so that's like a character trait or a soul trait that was lifted up, is not one that I had thought about. And when I started thinking about it after having read this, and it was rattling around in the back of my mind, I got really intrigued. So that's what we're going to talk about. And the character trait that was lifted up in this Torah commentary is Zerizut. And Zerizut means, some people translate it as alacrity, some people translate it as excitement, and a lot of energy, sort of an enthusiastic response. So I'm going to use the word zerizut so that we can be holding all of those definitions together, okay? So zerizut requires focusing on a task with a real deep sense of commitment. And there are three aspects to completing a task. One is an enthusiastic start, because otherwise you're not going to feel a sense of commitment. And then there's that sustaining energy, the perseverance to move forward, what my mother used to call stick-to-itiveness. You got to stick to it. Stay with the job. And then the third would be moving to a successful conclusion. So this Parsha offers us, I think, some really important lessons about working with all of the midot, because all of the midot, all of these character traits or soul traits are on a continuum. If you do it too much, it's not going to be good. If you don't do it enough, it's not going to be good. You've got to find that balance in the middle. So it's really important when working particularly with zerizut to remain mindful and not lose sight of underlying values, which I think we see some examples of. So in the Musar Torah commentary, the author of this week's commentary is Rabbi Alexandria Shuval Weiner. She says, we can see Abraham act with zerizut in both laudable and deplorable ways. We may learn from Abraham's example how to and how not to cultivate our own zerizut. So we'll discuss 4 particular examples of zerizut that she lifted up, and then some other stuff. So the first example in the Parsha is the way he welcomed the guests, these 3 strangers. He was in a physically compromised state. He was recuperating, and it's the middle of the day. He's at his tent in the desert, so it's hot. And he's described as running from the entrance of his tent to meet these strangers. And he ushers them back to the tent, and he arranges for them to be fed and to have water. He washes their feet, and he really is taking care of them. The phrase audacious hospitality comes to mind. He is super hospitable. And I remember learning many, many years ago that Abraham, and that indeed all the Abrahamic religions, elevate hospitality, because Abraham is this example of amazing hospitality. And this is always one of the things that's cited. So this is an example of zerizut. He is just running out there to greet them. He is enthusiastic. He is greeting them enthusiastically. Another example is how he, without missing a beat, speaks truth to power. So God tells Abraham that God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham says, wait a second, that's, so there are evil people there. It can't be that everybody's evil. You shouldn't destroy everybody. And Abraham enters into a negotiation with God about destroying these 2 cities. The final result is that the cities are destroyed, but Lot's family is allowed to leave or ushered away. So this was another example of zerizut. Very quickly, with a strong sense of moral correctness, of justice, Abraham argues with God. Then we have a couple of other examples that are not so lovely, but they're also good examples of Zerizut. The incident with Abimelech. Abraham very quickly feels frightened. He has this beautiful wife. Abimelech is going to want her. And in order to have her, he's going to have to kill Abraham. So Abraham says, oh, she's my sister. Not thinking what's going to happen to Sarah, thinking only what's going to happen to him. He saves his own neck by pretending that she is his sister. So for me, this is an example of what happens when we're fearful. We react from that amygdala, from that reactive place with no thinking involved. And we do what we need to do to protect ourselves. So this is an example of Zerizut, from my perspective, gone awry. But it is still Zerizut. And then there's the whole incident of the binding of Isaac. I think that this is probably the most disturbing story within the Torah for me. And for the first time in reading this, I had an inkling of understanding of the point of the story. So again, I'm quoting from the Musar Torah commentary. Considering Abraham's earlier heroic holy chutzpah, challenging God in chapter 18, one questions the direction of that alacrity now. The sages need to avoid the moral ambiguity inherent in the act of offering one's child to God as a fire sacrifice, and instead assert that Abraham's Zerizut is found in the diligence and speed he exhibits when commanded to take Isaac up to Mount Moriah. So there's that Zerizut, this quick to action obedience to God, which I would say is an example of Zerizut gone awry, run amok, because he didn't question. So there's this whole question about where's your moral compass, whereas he was so clear about his moral compass with the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, whom he did not know, and not clear about his moral compass when it came to his son. That's my interpretation. So throughout the Parsha, and many commentators, the verbs associated with Abraham's actions are things like exuberance and purpose and urgency and diligence. And these are all the hallmarks of Zerizut. However, Alan Moranis in Everyday Holiness points out, when we are considering the soul trait of enthusiasm, Zerizut, we're taking it as a given that there is a good moral compass in hand and that effective deliberation has taken place. Proper, positive, balanced enthusiasm is action done with full throttle once review, consideration, and decision have set you on the right course. So I think that we have a couple of examples here where Abraham did not take the time to really make a considered decision. So there's one other thing I really would like to point out before we move into our quiet meditation time. And that is the word Hineni, here I am. Abraham says this 2 times in this parsha. Once to God. God calls his name and Abraham responds, Hineni, and then God gives Abraham the instructions to take Isaac to Mount Moriah. And the other time is on the mountain. Isaac says, Father, and Abraham responds, Hineni, here I am. So I think that in both of these instances, Abraham is saying, I am here. I am fully present. I am really, really, really paying attention. And I think that's also an example of Zerizut. So it's not just the physical actions that we do with enthusiasm, but also, can we have an enthusiastic commitment to attention to our internal process so that we can make decisions that are aligned with our values? I think we need to be mindful, paying attention to the moment, to our responses physically and emotionally, so that we can make decisions that are from our prefrontal cortex and not from our amygdala. So I invite you now to adjust your posture. And as we take our seats and prepare for our quiet meditation, you may want to use the word Hineni or the phrase, here I am, as a mantra. So we will sit for about 7 minutes. So I invite you to deepen your breath a little. Slowly begin to bring your attention outward. And as you are coming back to the room, I am going to share a poem by Vanessa Hughes entitled Living in the Now. What's gone has made you what you are, so don't fear what's ahead. Put trust in what will be, and choose to live instead. Don't live in the now worrying what may or may not be. Take this moment in your time and live it totally. There's no time like the present. Breathe deep and feel alive. Living in the here and now will help you rise and thrive. Now is all there ever is. It's the only time that's real. Let the future take its course and leave the past to heal. And we had talked last week about beginning to incorporate the Mourner's Kaddish in our time together. So I am going to share my screen and bring up the Mourner's Kaddish. Can you see that? Okay, thank you. And I'm inviting anybody who would like to unmute to please do so. And those who want to say this can, and those who would rather not, feel free to just continue in your silence.
I would like to share the name of my father, Svi Hirsch Ben Zelig Vasera. Tomorrow would have, we're still in the first year of mourning. Tomorrow would have been his 100th birthday.
Thank you, Gail.
And also the name of my beloved husband, Gibor Ben Ram Miriam Gilwollen. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to share a name?
I would like to share the name of my mother, Myra Wolcott, who passed away on this date of our current calendar 9 years ago.
Thank you, Clint. Anyone else? Just please unmute and speak, because I can't see.
It's me, Orit. It's thank you for starting this. It's our maternal grandmother's Yahrzeit this week. Her name was Malka Ginsburg. We called her Sasa, and Amit would know how old she would have been this year, 120 something. But thank you. That's nice to remember her today.
Thank you. Thank you all, and may all of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, who's going to join me on off mute? You know, my Hebrew's not so good, so I need other people to be creating a cacophony.
Ready when you are.
Yitaba,
Yamal Divrach
V'yamlich
Malkute.
V'chayeichon
Uv'yemeichon
Uv'chayei
Kol
Beit
Yisrael,
Ba'agala
Ba'agala
V'zman,
Purim
Purim,
V'yimru.
V'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi
Yehi
Rabba
Torah,
Torah, Yolam
Yolam,
Omaya,
Barach, V'yishtabach, V'yipar,
V'Rama,
V'yitnaseh,
V'Yitadar, V'Yitale,
V'yitaleh,
V'Yitalo, Shemei,
Shekudashah,
Richu,
Le'ela,
Min
Kol, Birchata, V'shirata,
Tushbechata, V'Nechamata,
Nechemata,
Ta'amiran,
Damiran,
V'Yama, V'Imru.
Amen.
Amen. Yehi
Shlama Rabba
Rabba Min Shamaya.
Shamaya B'chaim
Chaim Aleinu
Aleinu
V'Yal
V'Yal
Yisrael.
Yisrael
Nimru,
V'Imru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh
Oseh
Shalom
Shalom
Nimrama.
Rama.
Nimraman Hu
Ya'aseh
Ya'aseh Shalom
Aleinu
Aleinu
V'Yal
V'Yal Kol
Yisrael.
Yisrael V'Yal
V'Yal
Kol
Yoshvei
Yoshvei
Tevel.
Tevel
V'Imru Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Fran, and thank you everyone for being a minion here today. Really appreciate this class.